which neither die nor are made manifest, how much will you bear? Now, it's very flowery language, a different language, but can you see now what is being said here? When you see your likeness, you rejoice. Meaning, when you're in the persona, and you're in the world of, oh, I play the fashion game, and everybody then gives me acknowledgement, and I give acknowledgement, you rejoice. But when you see the primordial images which come into existence before you, but these which are neither die or are made manifest, meaning the unconscious mind, how much then will you bear? It's an old story. And the teacher, remember, the threat. You know what the teacher does? He goes, project on me. Come on, dump it on me. And we do. And the teacher's job is to take all of that. As Carlos Castaneda and other writers have shown. The teacher is he's the guy we're going to bury in the sand, as we've done so many times before. The shadow is very powerful. It is a moral problem. It destroys relationships, and it destroys the teacher relationship with the one who's receiving the teaching. Yeah, looking at who we are, it's all it's about. The only solution is to look at who we are. As Alexander Pope said, know then thyself. Presume not God the scan. The proper study of man is man. William Blake said, thine own humanity learn to adore. But Carl Jung put it this way. He said, look, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to stop from facing their souls. Ever been outside recently? Ever turned on the TV recently? He's exactly right. People will do anything, no matter how absurd. And all that carnival that you see out there and all the distraction and nonsense that this world is wall-to-wall full of, that's what he's talking about. I must live in the Bahamas. I must live in a one-season world. I don't want to be looking at any of that stuff. Well, then okay. But then you've just condemned the world to horrors. You're just making a person in your life, your partner or your children, the victims, the slaves to your inability to face yourself. You're now having a person fill your void and your emptiness because you're not a whole person. And now you've enslaved that wife or that husband or that child or that animal or your workmates to your own form of tyranny. Yeah, you can't call the police on it, and you'll never get the court over it to prove that it's there, but it's there. And basically, repression doesn't work. There's a thing known as the return of the repressed. You can only dump so much of it before the stench starts to, come back. And as Carl Jung said in a well-known statement, he said, when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside of you as fate. Ha, ha, ha. Because there's a strange contract between the unconscious energy of our minds and the world, the energy that built the world. They conspire together. They're built out of the same stuff. So behind the back of the ego, the unconscious mind, the shadow, conspires with life, with material existence, to bring in front of you the very people, the very person, the very challenges, right? To help you integrate when you won't do it of your own free will. And we call that living. All the stuff that happens around us that we often describe as difficult challenges, that's what that is. We will refuse to do the homework, so then we're going to meet it in space and time. As the Greek said, your character is your fate. Now the next statement from Carl Jung is the one that is basically the theme of the entire presentation. Very important statement, and it is the crux of all of the work that I do, and all of the work that I will continue to do in this field. This is it, because I am not a person who will leave consciousness at the door. I am fully aware of all of the other obscenities that are taking place, in the name of God, in the name of religion, in the name of freedom and sovereignty. But you see, in my book, I will not leave consciousness at the door. And this is the reason. Carl Jung says that the gigantic catastrophes that threaten us today are not elemental happenings of a physical or biological order, but are psychic events. To a quite terrifying degree, we are threatened by wars and revolutions, which are nothing other than psychic epidemics. At any moment, several millions of human beings may be smitten with a new madness. And then we shall have another world war or devastating revolution. Instead of being at the mercy of wild beasts, earthquakes, landslides, and inundations, modern man is battered by the elemental forces of his own psyche. It's just that the other stuff, the symptoms of this, you can take a Polaroid of it. You can catch it on film. And you can call physical police to handle it. But there is a far greater form of violence going on that we are still to educate ourselves in. And it just so happens that the most toxic and unworked people just happen to be in power. So we've just diagnosed them. They just happen to be the ones most infected by the epidemic, and they're walking loose and hoping that you'll catch it too. But they're not what we first think that they are. They're not just mad politicians, whatever. These are people who have an epidemic. And they happen to always rule the societies because we let them. We permit it to happen. The masses of men and women in the Western world compulsively avoid true, authentic, and psychoanalytical investigations of their natures, even with help, particularly in regards to the so-called darker aspects of the personality, the shadow self, and so on. However, not dealing with the psyche at all proves systemically hazardous, so a compromise is required. So the ego is not stupid. It knows to continually be dumping without any integration will create total pathology. So it thinks, I'm going to get poisoned by all the stench coming from the back alley. Now, we want the house to look good in the front for the neighbors, but this stench is, creeping in. People going, is there something rotting around here? So it has to find a way of coming, doing some dumping, so to speak. So a compensation had to be found. And hence the proliferation of the New Age philosophy and movement, together with its many permutations. Riddled with ego-customized shams and gimmicks, the application of its methods serve, for the most part, to merely bolster the failing ego and its drives. You create inauthentic versions of cleansing, but might do a little topical spring cleaning without going too deep. It's called religion, or New Age movement. Western man has made himself bereft of the rites and rituals, the rites of passage, the shamanic methods for dealing with the build-up of his dark psychic content. As a result, he is patently psychologically arrested. His avoidance condemns mankind and the earth. It engenders psychotic and sadistic leaders who are able to play upon his fears and lower instincts ad infinitum. So we're getting to the core of it now. If we do not autonomously cleanse our psyches and strive to live morally, and if we continue to violate the natural order, remember I said nature goes through these cycles, it can handle the winter when everything dies and putrefies, because it knows what beautiful roses are going to come from that. Nature can do it, but we can't. And if we continue to violate the natural order because of our inner emotional and psychological toxicity, we will allow the ego to manifest surrogate channels to exorcise its repressions and other negative debris. In short, if we give up the right rulership of the self, we inevitably breed Orwellian political and religious tyrants to take over the job and turn us into what George Simmel, the psychologist, sociologist, said, smiling depressives, or worse. And there's two other proclivities, capacities that we have in our minds. In our ego consciousness, we also have two very important things. And again, both necessary, but we've taken them to extremes. And they're called projection and inflation. And the place where we can really examine them is in our relationships. The dark aspects of the personal psyche, which threaten the ego's autonomy and its vision of itself, are repressed, as we said. The shadow is the sum of all that we loathe about ourselves, and we project it onto other people and say they're responsible. This content is subconsciously projected onto others who become our external representatives of our personal shadow selves. In extreme cases, we also project this content through the field of other oblivious victims. That's an important one, but we're not going to get into it now. I'm working on a DVD and a website called Psychic Vampirism. You can go to psychicvampirism.com, and I've got something that's coming out that's going to be monumental on that, but we certainly can't visit that today. And additionally, there is the collective psyche and its dark content, which is at certain times likewise projected. So you do it with your individual mind, but we all do it collectively at certain phases in history. We literally all project on the famous nemesis that's created for us. And the politicians, they know how to manipulate that. We want the easy way out, and they have the pulse on the psyche, and they know how to help us with that kind of false exorcism. They're experts at it. I've always maintained in my work that if you don't know the motives of your enemy, then don't go into fight. You may know your motives, but if you don't know what makes them tick, we have zero knowledge of them. I've said it in the book, and I've said it in many talks. They have incredible knowledge of us. We don't even know what makes them tick. It's time to start finding out. That's like arming up to go and fight, find a tiger to shoot, but you don't have a faintest idea. In your mind, the tiger is a pink animal that flies in the sky. You don't know it's a thing with, inch-long razor-sharp teeth that's going to tear you limb from limb and can smell you coming 10 miles away. What good is it then you fighting the tiger? You're dead and buried and eaten is what's going to happen to you. which is what has been happening to the brothers and sisters who've been trying to stand